There are moments in history when a single man refuses to accept defeat, not because he is stronger, not because he is favored, but because he believes that surrender is a crime against destiny. Charles de Gaulle was such a man, a tall, stubborn, iron-willed soldier who watched his country crumble under the weight of war and still stood before the world to declare, France has lost a battle, but France has not lost the war. At a time when the world expected silence, he answered with defiance. At a moment when his nation bowed its head, he raised its flag. His life would become a story of rebellion, exile, war, redemption, glory, and conflict, a story of one man determined to shape the future of France with his own hands. Before we dive into the epic rise of France's most defiant leader, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to hear is a journey through war, power, and destiny. Charles-André Joseph Marie de Gaulle was born in 1890 in Lille, France, into a patriotic, Catholic, middle-class family that believed deeply in honor, discipline, and service. As a boy, he was fascinated by history books, especially tales of warriors and kings. He once wrote that he felt a certain idea of France, even as a child, of belief that his nation was meant for greatness. Tall, serious, and almost intimidating even as a teenager, he entered the St. Cyr Military Academy at age 20 and dreamed of commanding armies. When World War I erupted in 1914, the young 24-year-old lieutenant marched into battle with fierce determination, only to learn the brutal reality of war. He was wounded multiple times and eventually captured by the Germans. He tried to escape not once, not twice, but 5 times, refusing to accept imprisonment. Each attempt failed, but his spirit never broke. His fellow prisoners said he walked with the posture of a man who still believed he was leading an army. After the war, de Gaulle became known as an officer who questioned everything. He criticized outdated strategies and insisted the future of war depended on armored divisions and tanks. His ideas were ignored by the French High Command, but German generals, including the young Heinz Guderian, took them seriously. Germany listened. France did not. And in 1940, France paid the price when Nazi Germany launched its lightning invasion. France collapsed within weeks. At age 50, Colonel de Gaulle found himself in a country giving up, but he refused to surrender. He led a counterattack with tanks, one of the few successful French operations of the war, earning him a promotion to brigadier general. Still, the French government chose appeasement and armistice. De Gaulle chose rebellion. He fled to London, carrying nothing but a uniform, a vision, and the weight of a dying nation on his shoulders. On June 18, 1940, he delivered a broadcast that would become the most famous speech in French history. The flame of French resistance must not be extinguished, he declared. No army, no government, no territory. Yet he spoke like the voice of a nation itself. But let me ask you, what kind of courage does it take to speak for a country that no longer believes in itself? From exile, de Gaulle built the Free French forces, gathering soldiers, colonies, and resistance networks across the world. Winston Churchill called him the Cross of Lorraine in human form, brave, stubborn, impossible to manage. Churchill admired him, but also argued with him constantly. De Gaulle defended French interests with such intensity that even his allies found him exhausting. But he fought not for friendship, but for France. And as the Allied armies reclaimed Europe, de Gaulle marched triumphantly into Paris in 1944, greeted by shouting crowds, tears, and a nation desperate for dignity. After years of humiliation, France stood tall again, and Charles de Gaulle walked at the front. After the war, he led the provisional government, but resigned in 1946 when politicians tried to limit his power. He believed the system was weak, chaotic, and doomed to fail. He withdrew from politics, waiting, watching, almost like a general studying a battlefield before returning at the decisive moment. That moment came 12 years later, in 1958, as France was torn apart by the Algerian War and collapsing under political paralysis. The country begged for stability, and de Gaulle returned older, wiser, and more commanding than ever. As president, he wrote a new constitution, creating France's Fifth Republic, the strongest political system the country had seen in modern times. He granted Algeria its independence, ending a long and bloody conflict. Many saw this as courage, others called it betrayal. His decisions were bold, controversial, and always rooted in what he believed was best for France. He once said, "Greatness is a road leading towards the unknown." and he was willing to walk that road alone. In the 1960s, de Gaulle shocked the world again by pulling France out of NATO's military command, refusing American dominance and insisting that France must remain sovereign. He survived assassination attempts, mass protests, and political crises. His charisma was unmatched. His critics feared him. His followers adored him. He was not just a president, he was France's symbol, its guardian, its stubborn defender. Yet even giants grow tired. In 1969, after losing the national referendum, de Gaulle quietly resigned, choosing dignity over power. He retired to his home in Colombo-les-Deux-Églises, where he spent his days writing memoirs and reflecting on a life lived in the service of a nation. On November 9, 1970, Charles de Gaulle died suddenly at the age of 80, not on a battlefield, not in a palace, but peacefully in his own home. France mourned as if a monument had fallen. His legacy remains one of the most debated in European history. To some, he was the savior of France, the man who restored its honor and built its modern identity. To others, he was authoritarian, stubborn, impossible to compromise with. But one thing is undeniable. Charles de Gaulle refused to let France disappear from the world stage. He believed in his country with a passion so fierce that he bent history around it. In the end, he was the man who stood when all others fell, the voice that spoke when silence seemed easier, the leader who insisted that France cannot be France without greatness, that whether loved or hated, he became the very embodiment of that greatness.